All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Gear Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Durr, and today, Dorge and I are joined by special guest Tony Warden. Tony is a professional archer from Canada that has a ton of accolades. You'll hear all about that here in this first episode, but the premise of this podcast and a couple podcasts going forward are going to be breaking down Tony's studies on arrows. Tony is breaking down and testing a ton of different arrow setups from a bunch of different manufacturers in the industry, different fletchings, different nocks, different broadheads, the whole 9 yards, different combinations. This is a very extensive test, and at the time of this first recording, none of the data from phase 1 was released or published, and as I am releasing this episode, that information is actually published. So if you listen to this podcast and you want to learn more, you want to see what we're talking about, go to wardensoutdoor.com and you'll see all the different graphs and all the different studies from phase 1 of this testing, where Tony is basically testing speed deprivation, efficiency, and energy loss at different ranges from different arrow manufacturers, different processes to actually build the arrow. In part 2 of this podcast, when we sit down with Tony Warden again, we're going to specifically break down what he found. But at the time of this first recording, it wasn't released yet. He was still working on getting it published. But in this episode, we are talking about what he is trying to accomplish with his studies. It's a really interesting conversation. The amount of work that it took Tony to go through to get this information out to us, I can't thank him enough. It's super intriguing stuff. And at the end of this episode, if you don't want to try the Exodus MMT arrows, I don't know why. With that being said, everyone, good luck this weekend across the country. Seasons are going to be open everywhere. My neighbors over in Pennsylvania, good luck this weekend. Midwest, good luck this weekend. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's have an awesome bow season. I hope you continue to tune in as you make your drives to the stand. And like I said, I just can't thank you guys enough for tuning in and gaining this knowledge that my guests are willing to share with me. It means a lot. So with that being said, let's get into the podcast with Dorge and Mr. Tony Warden. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Gear Podcast. Today, I'm jacked up. We got some really cool information to share with everyone. I'm joined by Dorge again, and this time we have a new guest, Mr. Tony Warden. Tony is an archery enthusiast, is the title that I was given. Tony, how you doing? Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Jake. I appreciate it.
Dorge, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I mean, just like it's been crazy. You know, hunting season is around the corner. You can imagine.
Hunting season has started.
I know, but for most of the guy who hunt on October 1st, it's around the corner. I know some people are shot deer like you. That's a nice one you shot, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, today we have a really extensive test to discuss. So I think you guys may have even heard on previous episodes that Dorge was talking about all the different testing that he was hoping to have soon to go over, and we have the results. So why don't you, Tony, introduce yourself to everyone so everyone knows what to expect from you.
Okay, well, thanks, Jake. As you said, I'm an archery enthusiast. I started shooting in 1964. Probably the winningest archer in Canadian history. I've taken 2 IFAA world titles, 1 North American field archery title, and 15 Canadian field archery titles, along with being a bow hunter, an avid bow hunter. And I've tested out over 2,000 products during my lifetime for companies. Nothing to the extent of what I've done this time. I've spent the last 10 months just collecting the data and trying to make a little bit of sense out of the data. And that's just for phase 1 of this testing. I still have 2 more phases to go. And the testing all revolves around arrows, how close they are matched together, different concepts for fletching them, arrow flight, and then it'll be how broadheads affect them, how different lighted knocks affect your arrow flight. I'm hoping that this is going to be one of the most extensive looks into arrow building and arrow flight. I've kind of called it right now, tentatively, the flight of the arrow. But you know, that's doesn't sound like the greatest title either. I've put in a couple of thousand shots through it, through the lab radar unit. If your listeners aren't familiar with it, the lab radar unit will give you, say, your muzzle velocity, you know, the velocity right at 0, and then you can program it out, you know, over 100 yards for bow shooting, or shooting a bow, I should say. It will deal with handguns and rifles as well for their ballistic speeds. But all of mine has been done actually up to 60 yards. And then I used a calculation to project out to 100 yards, because trying to get those distances accurately is really difficult. So I've used the lab radar. It does the foot per second quite accurately. Unfortunately, like, it does give you your kinetic energy, but I found that probably 70% of the kinetic energy calculations weren't right. Unfortunately, like that, it's a big, that's a big program that they would have to put in to get it perfectly accurate. So I went back and recalculated using 3 different kinetic energy calculators. Okay, 3 that I trust, and all 3 of those gave me the exact same, like within 1,000th of a foot-pound of kinetic energy. So the data that I have is extremely accurate. I've done this all on my own. I have not had any product sponsors. Nobody's given me their arrows or fletching or anything like that. I either had it in stock from when I had my 2 businesses, or I went out and bought it myself. So I tried to keep this as unbiased as possible. What questions do you have?
Oh, I have a ton of questions. So I think as you were stating there, that I think it's important to note that we do have Dorge here, but this was an independent. This was an independent test. This was not for Firenock or in association with Firenock, but Firenock components were a part of the test, and Dorge is going to add his insight to that as well. So why don't we start with so phase 1 is done. Phase 1 is done. What went into phase 1? What were you testing, and what were the different how many different arrows, fletching components were in this test?
Okay. Phase 1 dealt with arrow weight, arrow speed, and kinetic energy. Okay, so anything to do with an arrow in flight. Used 7 different archery companies. Some of them I used maybe 2 different types of their arrows, some 5 and 6 types. It took into account crossbows and compound bow arrows. So I tried to give a very broad definition. I would have liked to have used more. Total, I used, between components and the actual arrow shafts, I used 19 different companies' products. Okay, whether it was either, you know, Firenock product, a boning product, Saunders products for components. Those are the main ones that I use. And then for the companies that I worked with, I used Gold Tip, Firenock, obviously. Who else did I use? Gold Tip. I used Carbon Tech,
Black
Black
Eagle.
Eagle. Yeah, so that was what, three?
Element.
Element Archery, yes. And we're going by my memory here. I unfortunately don't have a printout of it. And basically, I tried to use every possible combination between using, say, boning products on Dorge's Firenock arrows, or using Dorge's Firenock arrows combined with Saunders points on, Golden Eagle. I really tried to mix things up as much as possible. And in a nutshell, if you have that graph that I sent Dorge, you can see that everything as far as speed goes, up to about 30 yards, they're pretty darn close. It's once we start getting past 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, and more, you actually see a very large difference. Raven arrows were another one. I shot exclusively out of the Raven compound bows. And without giving away too much, because I'd like people to see the data and whatnot, you can basically see that how the Raven arrows will perform excellent, up to 20 yards, and then you start seeing a shift at 30, 40, 50. The rest of the group of arrows, they're all very, very close, under 30 yards. Which it's kind of great for the average shooter. But for your professional archers, your professional bow hunters, or your really avid bow hunters, and the guys out west that, shoot their crossbows 100, 150 yards out to get, to shoot a pronghorn antelope or whatever. That's where the real difference in the types of arrows and the style used to make the arrows. One thing that kind of hit me doing this, I started building my own arrows in 1970, okay? And when you look at the industry today, the one thing that stands out is that the arrow building, the way people build arrows now, is the same way that they built them back in 1970. And I was taught by my dad, who started shooting in like 1952. So nothing has really changed until now. Okay. The Concept 1.0 and Concept 2.0, when you're starting to get out farther in your distances, they do outperform. But the neat thing is, and Dorge is probably not going to like me saying this, but you can take a Black Eagle carnivore and make it into Concept 1 or Concept 2.0. It doesn't necessarily have to be his shafts that you use. I'm sure Dorge wants that. And to be honest, the only way, from what I understand, a person can get Concept 1 and Concept 2.0 arrows is getting built by one of his manufacturers, because it is a very precise and technical formula for doing this. But the other thing, and this is something that really stood out, the 1940s, 50s, 60s, all the way up till now, everybody's been using your standard Joe Jan, Bitzenberger, boning, all those type of arrow making jigs. And the one thing they all have in common is that you put your arrow on a 45-degree angle to fletch. Okay. The problem with that is the main thing, your glue, when you put it on, you're holding the fletching clamp with the vane in it. You're holding it straight across horizontally. You put your glue on, and then you turn and you put it on a 45-degree angle to clamp it onto your arrow. Okay, so picture this: glue is on nice and even all the way, and then you take it and you hold it on a 45-degree angle. That glue starts sliding down to the back of the fletching. So when you glue it on, you're getting more glue at the back, less glue at the front, and it makes a difference not only in arrow flight but arrow durability too. Okay, because you don't have as much, and it throws things offset. So that's why a lot of guys, when they build their arrows, they put a little dab of glue on the front of the fletching to kind of hold it down, because they come off real easy if they don't have enough glue. With the new, well, it's not really new, it's about 10 years old, but with the system, the
Arrow vane jig.
arrow vane jig. Thank you.
Yep.
You're always on a level working environment. You never have that 45-degree angle. So, I mean, arrow components have and arrow materials have all advanced over the years. All your archery equipment has advanced tremendously over the years, except for the way that people build their arrows. And to be honest, it makes a difference. Okay. I actually fletched some arrows up that had nothing to do with Firenock or the concept or anything other than their arrow jig. And it does make a 1 and 2% difference in the accuracy. Okay. It doesn't sound like a lot, but think about what at 40 yards, what 2% means. You know, if you're losing, say, around 7%, okay, on an arrow going 300 feet per second, you're losing 12 feet per second. If you go up another 1%, you know, you're up to 16 percent difference or 16 feet per second. You're going to drop a lot more. Your accuracy is a lot less. So that's really what the crux of all of this data is doing. Is it's kind of showing how arrows are flying, how they're made. You know, I've done my best to do a couple of videos on arrow making with both as I was building the arrows for this, which I hope to sometime get those put up onto, publish them onto the website as well. But the first thing we got to do is finish up all the different graphs so that I can get them, you know, the data published. But in a nutshell, to be perfectly honest with everybody, the best performing arrow out there is your Concept 2.0, using all the Firenock accessories or components to it. Definitely outperforms, including Dorge's 1.0. And I say that with the caveat that I was the one that invented the Concept 2.0. So yeah, there is a little bit of dealings between Dorge and I in that fact that you know, it just basically I thought, hey, what if we do this? And I did it, and we got the I got the results, sent them to Dorge, and he had it patented like within 2 weeks. But which, yeah, I mean, God love him. Dorge is such an amazing and smart human being. And I mean, for him to be able to deal with patent laws to get something patent that quick is amazing. But yeah, I can honestly say, and if any other archery company wants to send me their stuff and test it, and I'll go head to head, or I'll build them some arrows and they can test them head to head, I can confidently say the Firenock Concept 2.0 is the best made arrow on the planet as of right now.
When you say the best, in terms of what? In terms of speed deprivation or accuracy or penetration or all of the above?
All of the above. Okay. My initial testing, when I first tested the 2.0 system, we found that you'll be using a heavier arrow, 30, 40 grains heavier, but your point of impact is actually about 10 yards higher using the Concept 2.0 because it has a much flatter trajectory. I know it defies logic, defies physics, but it works. And I think one of the main reasons it works is because it takes your, for lack of a better term, wind tunnel and shrinks it down to its smallest possible. When an arrow flies, it doesn't just spin, it flutters and it kind of spins in an oval as well. And a regular arrow might have a what they call a 6-inch wind tunnel or wind current going around it. Anything that moves has a wind current. Okay, and the wind tunnel that I'm talking about is just the air pressure that it creates around the arrow
crosswind
shaft.
signature.
I'm sorry?
The crosswind signature.
Yes, thank you. Dorge is really technical on these things. I'm kind of a layman when it comes to this stuff. Describing this stuff, I understand it, but describing it, he's a little better at it. But yes, the wind signature. A standard arrow probably has about a 6-inch wind signature, okay, or air tunnel. When you get down to the Concept 2.0, you barely looking at it going past the fletching. Okay, so that allows it to keep more energy in flight than a standard arrow, and that was basically the science behind it. We're just taking the spin, increasing the spin, decreasing the wind tunnel, and yeah, we go out 80, 90, 100 yards, and you're shooting way higher with those than with any other shafts or any other way to make an arrow.
At what distance did you see that difference really take place?
40 yards.
40 yards. 40 yards and
40
out.
yards and out, there's a noticeable difference. And then, yeah, the farther that you go out, the better. I think at 100 yards, you guys have the chart. I don't, but I believe we're just around 10% drop at 100 yards from muzzle velocity, whereas some of the arrows are up around 20%, and I think the average is around 14% drop in technology, or sorry, in speed at those distances. So yeah, it stores and holds the energy much longer the farther that you go out.
Sure. So I have the chart here, and it looks like 13% of 13% of speed lost at 100 yards, and we'll just use a gold tip arrow as a comparison. And at 100 yards, it's at 17.5%. So that's a 4% difference. And then if you just look at the average here, it's going to be 18%. So Firenock lost just under 13% of its total speed, and the average would have been right at 18%, which is pretty
Okay,
substantial.
so the chart that you had, and I apologize to the listeners, I'm not sure what chart you were looking at. I also have a chart that breaks down concept 1.0 and 2.0
Okay.
along with the regular arrows. It's the same chart, but instead of just saying Firenock, it's got concept 1 and Firenock concept 2. So that's where the difference between me saying around 10% and you saying 13, the 10% is on the concept 2.0.
Okay. That makes sense. Dorge, what do you think of this data?
Well, actually, that confirms everything I said because see, initially when I was thinking about this back in 2014, when Rod White, the Olympic gold medalist, was doing the test on his original concept arrow called the broomstick, which I think in a few podcasts we mentioned it was done with the Black Eagle Rampage, and the thing is pretty phenomenal. And he, of course, a lot more meticulous than others. He actually make all the arrow weight the same, which I don't know how he did it, but he did it. Of course, front of center, he's trying his best to make it. He was using the heavy lead takes and so on to make sure the arrow weight about the same thing with the weight same distribution. That's where the data actually, when he gave me, he said it's so phenomenal. That's where his initial data with the Rampage at 100 yards, the impact difference is about at 60 yards is 38 feet per second difference just by using concept and without concept with the same weight, which is really, sometimes people can't even think about it. Because a 28.5-inch draw, 70 pound at 60 yards with 38 feet per second difference. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's a giant deal.
Very big deal. And just to let you know, I did not adjust any of the weights, like Dorge was just saying, to make them the exact. I took the shafts that I had, and they're all the same length. The arrows are all cut the same length. The crossbow bolts are all the same length. But that, as far as that goes, that's all I did. I did not want to try and match weights exactly because my research wasn't focused on if everything is the exact same, which hits the better. Most, probably 90% of your bow hunters there, they just say, grab a dozen arrows or half a dozen arrows, and they start shooting them. And that's what I try to emulate in this first phase was, what happens if a guy just goes into a pro shop, grabs a dozen of whatever type of arrows and takes them and starts shooting them, and that's where the bigger differences is between what Dorge usually tests and what I've done with this testing.
Sure. So one thing that I want to ask is, did you do any testing with Aero Concept 1.0 or Aero Concept 2.0 and not Aero Vein 2 or Aero Vein 3? Was it like Aero Concept 1.0 with blazer vanes, or did you do any testing like that?
No, I did not. That's.
I think we need to add that. You know why? Because that actually added I thought that we discussed that, but somewhere along the line, no, you get so busy and you got all the shoots to do. By the way, Tony is a professional shooter now in quite a few shoots. And he actually at this moment, I believe you still shoot for Gearhead at this moment?
Yes. I helped them in their research and design. Skip there, he's been great, helping me out, giving me some equipment to shoot and whatnot. But yeah, I do actually have a dozen arrows set up to do exactly what you're saying. I just have not been able to get out. They're going to be not part of phase 1.0. There's going to be a phase 2.0 where some of the things like doing a concept 1.0 in, say, a gold tip, okay, with other people's veins rather than the concept or
I remember that.
Firenock.
Yeah, sorry, Tony. Yeah, that's part. You see, that would be too much data because
Yeah.
you want to do simulate the arrow shaft first. Then you, I saw a mention there. I know it's going to be a big difference if you have arrow thing, but those are all in the crossbow section, especially on higher distance, higher speed, like
Yeah.
your 350, 375, all the way to 500. Because see, based on mathematical data that I have, without the correct vein, the moment you pass that 350, it's going to be ugly. But
Exactly.
then that's going to take a lot more time. And then now we're going to use the radar purely at 100 now, because
Mhm.
when you start shooting at 375 feet per second to 500, you saw like that's 0 to 50. You saw like, what's the point?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there, I've got that coming out. Like I said, I have 12 arrows fletched up from a totally different manufacturer that I've done now. So I've got that to be set up. I also have non Dorge type shafts fletched with his technique. Okay, I call it the science of archery technique on in my testing because, well, that was a catchphrase I came up with, but um, it is a much more scientific way to build an arrow. So we're gonna see what the differences are, not only in doing concepts with other components, but using his components on other types of shafts, other companies' shafts. We're going to mix and match on that and see what our arrow flight is. And then we're going to add in the broadheads, and then we're going to add in lighted nocks. I've got 3 different lighted knock companies that I'm going to be working through on the videos. So yeah, we're phase 1 is long, but I've still got months yet to go for phase 2 and phase 3. So it will be coming. I
Okay.
guess short answer would be.
What do you think was the most eye-opening thing for the entire test? So you have test 1 being crossbow, test 2 being standard hunting diameter, test 3 being 204 hunting diameter, and test 4 being 166 hunting diameter. Did you see any significant difference when you changed the diameter of the shaft?
Oh yeah. To be honest, what I was surprised at the most was how the 166 diameter performed. I was expecting, uh, let's say, not a very good result from them because I have had experience with 166 arrows in the past, but I guess the last 15 years since I've used one, they've really upped the standards of them. I mean, I've had them break off hitting a target,
Sure.
just a regular practice target. So I was pretty skeptical about the quality and how 166 arrows perform. And then, one caveat to that is the fact that I did use Firenock components for it. I just didn't trust the other styles as much.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I was really surprised with how they perform the 166.
Can you do you remember any of the hard numbers or data from any of the comparisons from 246 to 166?
No, I don't, and that's gotta wait until I publish it.
Sure.
Okay, I don't want to give out a lot of exact details yet because I kind of like to surprise people. What I sent Dorge is just a 1-page type of thing compared to what I'm going to have to publish here. And I
Sure.
will be publishing. I took photos of all of the results using the lab radar. Every time I shot an arrow, I took a picture of it. So it shows, the V0 velocity at 20, 30, 40, 50, all of that. Unless an arrow, like sometimes it didn't register, and I just put in the results, did not register type of thing. So we excluded that from the calculations.
Sure.
But yeah, everything is pretty close to being published.
Where will that be published when it's ready?
Well, I think I only have maybe 2 or 3 charts left that I have to do. So give me some time. Well, today's the 13th. I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks, because I want to get it done before I go deer hunting.
Yeah. I don't blame you there. Dorge, was there anything in the data that you looked at that really stood out to you?
No, actually, the data is expected. We've been talking about this for a very long time, but I just got tired of people telling me, this can't be, this can't be, this can't be. So I say, Tony, I mean, I being an avid archer and retired and come back and play, I think you will be one of the people with, first of all, you have credentials. When you come up data with your personal integrity, every people would trust what you have done because you've been doing archery for so many years, and not to mention be a person that a lot of people in the older generation actually know archery, know you. I think I'm trying to write on his credibility to prove what I have been saying all along, because
Sure.
you get tired of people saying that it can't be,
Yeah.
Well, if everybody say it can't be, let's get up with some factual data. That's the reason when I finally come and say, oh, you know what, I will come up with the equipment, and that's the reason I bought the lab radar. I bought I have just like when I might do experiment with Rod White, I bought the high-speed camera. I learned a lot, because until you actually got some hard data to talk about, it's just talk about.
Yeah, we live in the world of show me, don't tell me.
Yes, exactly.
Now, can I interrupt you guys for 1 sec?
Absolutely.
Just make a point. Dorge said he approached me. He did, but I want to assure everybody, and I told this to Dorge before I even agreed to do this. I said, Dorge, you're going to get the data, good, bad, or indifferent to Firenock. I don't care. If it shows Firenock is the worst out there, then that's what's going to show. And it's going to be up to him whether he wants to prove the data wrong or right or whatever. And I've told that to all of the companies that I'm using their products with. I don't sugarcoat things. I was asked to do this, so I said, we're going to do it. We're going to do it on my terms, and my terms are totally independent of your feelings or anything.
Sure.
And there's other companies that I shot for when I was shooting professional archery. They're included in this. I have loyalty to a lot of different arrow manufacturers, bow manufacturers, crossbow manufacturers, but the data is the data. It's not tainted whatsoever by me. I'm stepping. What am I doing? I'm betting.
You're the tester and nothing else. Your reputation rides on it.
Yes. I'm I'm putting my reputation on the line for these numbers. But so far, like Dorge said, he's pretty happy with the numbers too. I'm sure most of the arrow or shaft manufacturers are going to be happy with this, because this is useful data to them as well.
Oh yeah.
If they want to make changes or tweaks or say, hey, try these arrows out, we want you to do this, I have no problem doing that, as long as they realize if I'm going to do that, like I tell any of the over 2,000 clients that I've tested products for in the past, you're going to get the data, good, bad, or indifferent. I don't sugarcoat anything in my process or in my results.
That's good. I've done some testing myself, and it's a brutal world. What people will say to you,
Oh
and
yeah.
the rebuttals are always very interesting. Man, I could study the comment section um of your results for hours, I bet, when this stuff is
Oh, I'm
published. I mean,
sure.
it's one
I
of go ahead.
I had a website. It was only for 10 months. Okay. It's called Warden's blog, where I was doing product reviews. I ended up with over 1 million views. I started in February. By August, I had 1 million views. I had manufacturers mailing me their products to test out for my blog. And I did one test on a crossbow company, and it wasn't a very favorable test. Uh, I got bashed on Crossbow Nation. It was kind of it was kind of funny, people are, this guy must just be, some hack that's trying to make a name for himself and everything, until I published my resume. And yeah, that kind of shut them up after that.
Yeah, what can you really argue with there?
Yeah, I mean, you don't argue with a guy that his first pro contract was with Hoyt. I've shot for PSE, Martin, all the big companies.
Is there anything in this data that you're hoping to find that maybe you haven't seen yet, or can you give me some? Let's say answer that first, and then I'll have a couple more questions.
Well, not really. I was, and the data is already showing it for the most part. Uh, the technique to building your arrows. That's the part that really interests me, because there's so many different, fletching jigs out there that do the same thing. And then, God forbid, you get one of those tower type ones, because as soon as you put your glue on those, even if it's insta glue, it's going to run down to the bottom of your vein before you can clamp it on. The only time I've seen those work is when you have spray glue, but that's when you've got a big um, professional machine for putting out 100 dozen arrows a day. Um, so yeah, nothing has really surprised me about this. The performance of one company kind of surprised me. I thought that honestly it would be a lot higher uh, in the results, but other than that, no. I mean, I've shot every possible bow out there, including a Yumi bow. I've shot all the different types of arrows, over the years. So it's kind of hard to surprise me with stuff anymore.
Sure.
Last time I was surprised is when I met Dorge.
That makes sense. So, okay, I want to kind of get your give me a as quick of a rundown as you can of what phase 2 is actually going to be.
Phase 2 is going to be mixing the components for the concept 1.0 and 2.0 with different manufacturers' shafts, as well as using those concepts, but then using other manufacturers' components.
Okay.
Okay. I'm still debating whether I'm going to do that and then put the broadhead and lighted knock part into a phase 3, or if I'm just going to combine it all into one. It's going to kind of depend on the weather, for one thing, because
Sure.
shooting out 100 yards, you've got to have decent weather. So that's a lot of what took us so long. That and getting used to the lab radar and its little quirks, because it is a very sensitive machine to use.
Yes,
I
it
don't know
Oh,
is.
experience
yeah,
with it.
let me add to that.
Two inches, you can move that thing 2 inches and it makes a difference.
Yep.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you remember that we tried the lab radar for a long time and it never worked.
Yeah.
Because your
Then you would
earbuds.
Yes, it was the earbuds.
Yeah. The microphone that I was using to talk on camera with, because I also recorded the entire sessions that I would shoot. Okay, so you could see right from start to finish that I wasn't fudging anything, and I could not get this thing. It would work a little bit, right at first, and then as soon as I got ready to start filming, it would stop. Couldn't understand what was going on till talking with the people at LabRadar, and they said, "Well, it could be your microphone because it's a cordless one." And sure enough, I turned the cordless microphone off. Works like a dream.
The frequency was the same
Yeah,
there.
the frequency was too close.
That's funny. Okay, so let's say for conversation's sake that you split phase 2 and phase 3. What do you have any predictions for what's going to happen for phase 2?
Honestly, I do, but I'd really rather not say, because then people might say, well, you're going into this tainted. You've said this on the air, so it has to be. But let's put it this way. There are some component aero matches that I think are going to outperform others by a fair amount.
Okay, that's
Just leave
fair.
it at that.
That's fair. Now, entering phase 3, when you throw, let's just say broadheads here,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any predictions for that? What's going to happen when broadheads come into play?
Well, I think the first thing we're going to see is that wind tunnel effect that I was telling you about. I think that's going to increase quite a bit. Okay. Because especially on fixed blade, that's why everybody's going to the mechanicals. But to be honest, the mechanicals I don't think are going to show up as well as everybody says. Okay. Most people say they shoot exactly the same as your field points. Well, there's exactly the same, and there's close where it hits, within
Sure.
3 or 4 inches.
Yep.
Like my dad would say, it's good enough to kill a deer.
Yep.
I can see that happening. I'm hoping it doesn't, but I would be surprised if it surprised me.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you know what broadheads you're going to be testing in that?
I do. I have, let's see, I've got some Rage. I got Wasp. I got my own personal broadheads. I've got 2 different types of broadheads that I purchased from Dorge. The, what is it? The Falcon or Talon, one of the 2 for crossbow, and his daggers for the compound bow. So I want to see how they all go. I'm using, actually, I got a couple of, they're not named yet. Like Wasp was showing a new type of expandable broadhead. Doesn't have a name or anything on it yet. So, though we've got some that are in the works too that aren't really being promoted yet.
Sure.
So I'm going to do that. And then right now for the Nocks, I have Nocturnal, Loom Knock, and Firenock. Those are basically the big 3 that are being used. I'm trying to keep things to, what everyday archers use.
Sure.
In my things. And then, I mean, there's, I think what's really surprising me more than anything is the distances people are shooting game at now. I mean, my average deer, let's say, I've shot at about 48 yards away. I'm hearing guys like Dorge, who, he's a rookie to me. He's shooting 60, 70 yards away and dropping deer instantly. I mean, the technology that way is really surprising how accurate bows and crossbows are out to 100, 150 yards. Dare I say it, 200 yards? I mean, some of these crossbows that are pushing 500 feet per second, if you're bench resting, it's very easy for you to shoot 200 yards with those things. So that is very surprising. Just in the last 5 or 6 years, how far we've extended our shooting range.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I would have never even considered shooting a deer at 40 yards. Everyone's like, oh, 30 yards and under, like the old way of thinking of
Exactly.
30
Yep.
yards and under is it's kind of gone. We're able to extend our effective ranges a lot further with the technology that we have. However, someone needs to come up with a sight tape for Aero Concept 1.0 and Concept 2.0 because after 60 yards, mine is just junk.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I don't think you can because, well, I guess it's possible, but because there's so many
Variations.
variations that you can put through, like say for a crossbow, you know, uh, you've got your speeds, from 300 or 250 up to 350. They can graph that out and make an easy chart. Uh, because it's going to be very similar no matter what system you use until you throw in this concept 1.0 or concept 2.0. And then, like you said, all those graphs get thrown out the window because
Yep.
there's so many variables that you can do. And Dorge knows more about that than I do. The different lengths of the internal components and whatnot make a huge difference. So, yeah, that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, yeah. I basically just cut my sight tape at 60 yards, and then I found one that was kind of close, that was a little bit closer together, and just
Mhm.
kind of combined two different sight tapes to get close. But I'm still not confident that if I had to dial it into a yard, that it would be accurate. And then my boss Chad's, his speed is a lot. He's shooting a lot faster than me. His
Mhm.
after 40 yards is junk.
Yes.
Yep. That's the reason, that at one point I was asking, should people really start thinking site tape? I think site tape is going to end up to be an app that you put in your actual data, and then you transfer the
Ooh.
data into a tape and you put it on. That was original. I was talking to my daughter and say, should we just go and write the damn thing?
You
Yes.
should.
Do it,
So
please.
Well, it's on air now, George. You have to do it.
you know how many, that's another one of those IT projects.
Mhm.
It's not that difficult. The only difficult is the print drivers. As me being I'm one of the few guys who actually know computer well. Yes, I mean, can we do it? Yes. What I would, if I want to do it, I would most probably do it on a brother printer or which is a handheld brother printer
Right.
because it's a waterproof tape. And
Yeah.
then we also get about 160 dpi. That will make life easy. The only question left is how big do we to put the numbers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Just remember, if you're doing this, there's a lot of old guys like me that can't see the teeny tiny numbers that you get on some of these tapes. So,
Good call. I mean, that's the reason maybe we should just put big gigantic 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on it.
Yeah. Well, Dorge, I'm going to ask you the same question. So I think you're able to give a prediction because then you're not part of the testing. Phase 2, when you take your components and put them in different shafts, what are your expectations?
No, actually, I pretty much know what the result would be, but I want to prove. That's the reason when me and Tony was discussing a long time ago, I want him to do it. Is that the fact that the more you go aero concept, just like we talk about the fish effect from a halibut to a tuna to a eel, that's going to be a big deal to the veins. So you'll find out the Aero Wing 2 is going to jump quite a bit. And with Aero Concept 2.0, with Aero Wing 3, you're allowing the Aero Wing 3 to spin correctly. I mean, this reason is so compound. and which is the reason I moved from a simple insert. Remember, we at Firenock, we do not make arrow until the last 4 years. We're in business since 2006. I'm selling components only, which is why a lot of people say, Dorge, your component never fit perfect. I say not perfect for your arrow because there's such a huge variance.
Sure.
But you build it correct.
246.
Right. I mean, just like 246. The smallest is 242, which is weak by common impact. The biggest element is more like a 247. But in the case of 202, the smallest is common expressed as 201. The biggest is element at 207. That's 6 thousandths on a 200.
Yep.
Just look at percentage. That is what? That is 3% difference.
Yep. There's a lot of room for epoxy in there.
Yes.
Correct. But I have to make those because see, I make them for every single arrow. Just like a lot of customers hate me say, hey Dorge, I put your A1H24A on my 246 450 spine. How come you got such a big lip? I say, yeah, because you need to cover the 246 like a Carbon Express power driver, which have the thickest wall.
Yep.
And then you can't make everybody happy, but that's what I'm a component maker at heart. So when Tony this reason all the technique I use has to be good on every single arrow. Is some arrow better than others? Absolutely. So I predict that, first of all, just like this is do not make surprise me, just like I'll make a lot and manufacturer unhappy. It's like you can put Aero Concept 1.0 or even 2.0 on a Black Eagle, say Outlaw, which is a $45 dozen arrow. After 50, 100 shot, you find out you will absolutely outperform a Goatee Pro Hunter. That's 1,000 straighteners. No, it will outperform it. I'm not just saying it. It will outperform it. So the shaft capability is really so minor compared to components. Sure. I mean, the example I always use is like, you go and bought a Toyota Sienna CE, which is a $23,000 car, and you look at the XLE Limited or the Drive, that's a $62,000 car. What's the difference? Same chassis, same panel, same engine.
The tires.
The components.
Yep.
But that's where you're paying twice the money.
Sure.
Am I helping?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I expect too. I bought some just regular shafts as well, and I'm going to do some like grained, like diameter testing. So I'm going to take a 246 shaft that weighs exactly as much as an MMT. One of them's going to have the Aero Concept in it. One of them's not. And I'm just going to see how much better it actually is, because I know it's better. So I just want with that Labrador, you can do so much in the show me, don't tell me. A lot of this podcast is just telling, I don't have visual proof, but I'm working on it. We're working on it. And now Tony's done it for everyone to see. So maybe I don't even have to do that anymore. I'm just going to send my stuff to Tony and say, hey, Tony, include this in your testing.
Well, actually, you should do it too. The more people do it, better.
Sure.
Yeah, Tony, sorry.
No, that's okay. I just said if he wants, be my guest. I have no problem testing products out for others, as long as, like I said, good, bad, or indifferent, the results are the results. So, if you don't like my results, don't blame me. It's the stuff that you wanted me to test.
Yeah, well, if we don't like our results, we're blaming Dorge.
Yes, absolutely. And I would take the blame and I would improve it. But so far, I know I give everybody of what I know is the best.
I want to send my broadhead, my personal broadhead that I shot out to you just to see. Dorge, I shot that dagger the other day. Pretty sweet.
Well, I told you that dagger, if you use it with AeroVic 3 correctly, as I said, just like the field deer I shot with it, like Tony shot a bear with it too. How long does that bear move, Tony?
Well, I shot a record buck, Northern Ontario black bear 2 years ago, and it went 10 feet.
What?
Yeah, the buck I have shot it dashed.
And that was with the dagger. The dagger 125, I think is what it was.
Yeah, the 125 dagger, yes. And then just like the dagger, the first deer I shot with the dagger, it was going downhill. It barely made 20 yards. And the funny thing is that there's no blood on the floor. And people say, what? I say, well, if you know how it works, you really should not be looking for the wrong thing.
Yeah, right. Look for the animal, not the blood.
Exactly.
Sure. Well, okay, Tony, I have one last question for you, and then we're going to wrap this up. So you're going hunting tomorrow. You're hunting.
No, not tomorrow. At
No,
the
no,
end
no,
of
no. This is my question to you.
Oh, if I'm going
This is a
hunting.
hypothetical.
All right.
You have to go hunting tomorrow. You have a 200-inch whitetail on camera, and you know you're going to kill him tomorrow. You're hunting with a compound bow. What is your arrow setup?
My arrow setup, well, I can tell you exactly because this will be my setup this year. I shoot the sport weave shafts. I shoot Concept 1.0. I will be shooting arrow vein 2s with Firenock lighted nocks, and for the compound bow, I'll be using my daggers, the Dagger 125s.
A 300 or a 246?
Oh,
It's a diameter.
Yeah.
246.
Okay. So you're basically shooting an Exodus MMT.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Well, that's good to know. Is there anything you want to leave this podcast with? Any insight, plug what you have going on, tell people where to look for you?
Well, like I said, it's going to take a couple of weeks, but the website will be www.wardens.ca. So just wardens.ca. And, if there's any manufacturers out there that want to include their products, I know a couple of companies we couldn't hook up to get the permission for. So I left them out of this first phase, but I have no problem revisiting it for people.
That sounds good to me. Dorge, anything you want to leave off with here?
No, actually, it's pretty good. I mean, I want to sort of introduce Tony to the world because a lot of people know him, but not in your generation. Because Tony is famous in the previous generation, winning so many things as a team captain of Hoyt. I mean, he is very renowned, but as you know, he is retired and he's sort of coming out to help us new archers. Or help you guys, new archers. It's with me.
You're still a rookie, man. You're still a rookie.
I have to admit it.
Well, that's cool. I look forward to hearing more from you, Tony. Thank you for taking an hour out of your busy life today to help us with this. You could be out there testing. Instead, you're here talking to us.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to give my research a little bit of notoriety, and hopefully some people will be able to use it.
We'll keep chugging along with it. So thank you guys. Have yourselves a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye.